Hey everybody, it's Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. We've got a lot to talk about this week. We've got two storm systems heading our way, but all the talk is about the second storm system, which is heading our way on Wednesday. And everybody was, hitting me up this weekend, private messaging me, commenting, "Oh, I hear we're getting snow." We're not getting snow. Let me put that to rest right now. I would love for this to be snow, but this is not a snow setup by any stretch of the imagination. It is either a cold, miserable rain, freezing rain, or possibly some sleet. But the freezing rain thing is our primary concern with this. And I'm going to explain that here in a minute. But let's first get into what's going on with system number one, which is heading our way tonight. Now, there is some snow on the backside of system number one. So in the mountains, I wouldn't be shocked to see a little bit of snow on the backside of this. But this is primarily warm air. It was 70 degrees today. So we're looking at primarily some very heavy rain, maybe even a severe thunderstorm for parts of the area. There's two distinct systems. System number one is our Monday storm. This is our Wednesday storm. It's basically going to follow on the heels of it. Now, the first storm kind of sets the stage for the potential for the icy weather. The reason it does that, it brings in some colder weather. So let me kind of show you the setup here of the systems approaching. So here's system number one tomorrow. Notice we're all in the warm air. Look at that storm moving through there right around 8 o'clock in the morning. You've got to keep an eye on this tomorrow morning. I would not be shocked to see a severe thunderstorm warning or some gusty winds. I don't think there'll be a tornado threat, but it's not zero. Let's just say that. So we got to watch severe weather threat tomorrow. That moves through, and you see on the backside there's a little bit of snow in the mountains, but not a whole lot. It does turn much colder behind the system for everybody, but this is shallow cold air. What I mean by shallow, I mean it's colder near the surface than aloft, and of course it's colder the higher up you go, but the deep cold air is when we have really, really cold air all the way through the atmosphere. This type of setup means we've got kind of what we call a wedge of cold air, which means it's very thin. If you think about three dimensions, think about a wedge or a door stopper that would stop the door, and we're at the very tip of the wedge, so it's very thin. Whereas you get up into Virginia, the wedge would be thicker, right? Kind of the wedge. That's why it's sometimes referred to that. In that very shallow area near the tip where we are in most of the North Carolina areas, the cold air is very shallow, so the warm air aloft wins out, and we end up with freezing rain, more so than anything. So watch this system approach. So this is Wednesday morning. You could see some of the moisture arriving, and that pink showing up is likely freezing rain or sleet, but it transitions to rain very quickly, except for areas east of the mountains there. And you kind of see the spot I'm talking about right there up into Virginia. And I'll show you this closer up, but I want to show you kind of the overall pattern setup for this approaching. And it's this typical wedge that you've probably, if you lived in this area, you've heard of this a million times, sometimes referred to cold air damming or a wedge of high pressure. What it means is high pressure builds over the northeast, typically upstate New York, Pennsylvania, the northeast. Clockwise flow drives cold, dry air near the surface, and it gets trapped against the mountains because it's heavy and dense. So it sits right up against the mountain. So that cold air backs against the mountains. And that setup, typically, then we have warm, moist air riding up and over it, and we end up with a cold rain or ice. This is our ice storm setup, if you will. If we're going to see an ice storm, this is the setup. The way you sustain an ice storm, though, is you have northeasterly winds keep pumping in the cold air at the same time that warm air is aloft. If this is only short-lived, then eventually this all changes to rain, and that's kind of what the setup is for this system going into Wednesday. So here's the hour by hour. We'll break it down. I'll show you the hour by hour for tomorrow first. See how warm it is overnight? We're in the 50s to near 60. Look at that line of storms right there. I mean, that's 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. That moves through, a little bit of snow on the backside, but then notice the temperatures cooling down real quickly Monday night into Tuesday morning. We drop into the 20s and 30s. So really cold day on Tuesday. We might only be in the 40s for highs. And then as we go into Tuesday night, the next system approaches from the west, and we start to see moisture moving in from the southwest, and it starts riding up and over this cold, dry air at the surface. So this is 4 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday morning. Notice the temperatures. These will be really key. Up in here, we're right around the freezing mark. Down here, we're kind of in the mid-30s. Watch as the moisture moves in. Some evaporative cooling goes on. We get close to freezing in Charlotte, so I wouldn't be shocked to see a little bit of ice up in the treetops as we go into Wednesday morning. That's certainly a possibility. But as we go through the day, the warm air kind of wins out, and that cold air gets trapped against the mountain. So you see real quickly, let me back this up. Through the middle of the day, we're going to have some potential where we could have possibly some significant icing going on right in here, Interstate 40. Down here, it's all rain eventually. So you could see there was never any white on the map, which is snow, right? And there's good reason for that because the way the atmosphere is set up. And it stays mostly a cold rain before it begins to move out. But notice how it could stay ice in the mountains for some extended period of time. That's the area that we're most concerned about. So right now, based on the setup right now, and again, stay tuned, this could change. I expect mostly all rain for Charlotte. There could be some ice at the beginning, but it would be very short-lived. But that ice potential in the areas in pink would be very problematic. And potentially in these areas right in here that typically the cold air gets trapped, we could see prolonged freezing rain, which could mean quarter inch, half inch, maybe in some locations that would cause trees and power lines to come down. Small chance for snow up here, but I think that's starting to exit out of the region pretty quickly. And I think that threat is going to exit, pretty fast. Why do we get these setups? Well, oftentimes people ask me, when we have rain, we've got warm air near the surface. Obviously, that's the setup. When we start to see sleet or freezing rain, or mainly freezing rain develop, we've got a very shallow layer of cold air right near the surface. So this is falling as rain, liquid rain. It's hitting the ground and then it's freezing. This is the equivalent of taking a hose outside on a cold day and spraying the ground. It's all liquid, but then it freezes after it hits the ground. That's what freezing rain is. Sleet is actually physically ice falling from the sky. It's like going and getting ice from your freezer, crushing it up and throwing it outside. And you can see when we get sleet set up, we typically have some warm air just off the surface, and the rain can refreeze on the way down into ice. So there's your rain to sleet kind of transition. And this happens, this will go back and forth. And if we have all snow, it's usually cold all the way down to the ground. You can even have temperatures very close to the ground, maybe at 35, 36, even 40 degrees, as long as it's cold enough all the way to here and it doesn't have time to melt before reaching the ground. So that's kind of the setup. And I wanted to show you a couple things real quickly as far as what we look at for some of this guidance. So people are wondering, why aren't we going to see snow? Well, I'm going to show you real quickly here. I'm going to show you the sounding first. So this is kind of the sounding up in the Hickory area for Wednesday afternoon. And what you're looking at here is an atmospheric profile. Down at the surface, the air temperature is about 31 degrees, but just above the surface, you see what we call a warm nose right there, where the temperature is above freezing. So moisture's falling down, it's melting in the rain, and it's getting down to the surface and refreezing. That is a freezing rain setup right there. That is not a rain sounding at all. And just to show you what this looks like in the modeling, if we look at the short range ensembling, I would look first at the snowfall. So why aren't we seeing snow? Let me show you the snowfall forecast all the way through Thursday morning. Notice there is no snow anywhere in here, and even in the mountains, just barely a half an inch to an inch. So this is the ensemble mean. This is taking all the different members and averaging them out. That's zero snow, okay, except for the mountains, and even there, that's nothing. Let me show you the freezing rain setup at this. Freezing rain total, same thing. You can see the freezing rain totals all the way through Thursday morning. Notice even around Charlotte, the north side of town, there's a couple spots with a couple hundreds, not a bunch, but look at that heavy icing up in here. You're talking a quarter, half an inch of ice. So it's all ice setup in this situation. There's really no setup here that looks like snow right now. The only saving grace could be if this stays more rain, or if it stays more sleet, that might cut down the icing. But when I see these type of icing numbers, and I know this area well, those areas up against the mountains, they typically stay colder longer, and we have seen just some mechanical lift of the air can cause freezing there. So potential for some significant icing in some of those locations. So that's why when I posted earlier today, if you live in that area of pink I showed earlier, up there north of Interstate 40, I would prepare just in case for potentially an ice event where we could have power outages, because that's the type of icing we could see. There's plenty of moisture, and if the air should be cold enough, that 32, 31 degrees, we could see some significant ice. So we've got time to keep an eye on this. So, today is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. We've got 2.5 whole days, or really 2 days, to get you ready for this. But I want you to know tonight, if you live in those areas, please be prepared. There's potentially an ice storm coming for those areas in the foothills in the northwest Piedmont. Stay weather aware, folks.